It's time for your daily LSU baseball update with Musso at the box. Now, Matt Musso.
And welcome into another edition of Musso at the box. The final week of the regular season is here for 2024, and LSU has their butt planted firmly on the bubble. We all know what happened this past weekend at Alabama for LSU's most recent series. We've recapped that ad nauseum, and I don't really want to talk about that anymore. But you're heading into the final week. There's still plenty at stake, and that's going to be the conversation today. We will once again look at LSU's updated path to postseason play. There are some cut and dry scenarios for LSU. We'll run through them anyway. And then there is another scenario that obviously involves the SEC tournament, which we will talk an awful lot about from here on until then. So buckle up. We are going to go through it all here on today's Musso at the box. Get subscribed up. If you have not already, smash the like button. Get subscribed up on your favorite podcast app as well. Share the video, share the podcast, all of that greatly appreciated. And of course, follow me on social media if you are not already. We do a lot of interaction there, questions, Q&A, things of that nature and whatnot. So let's dive in. Let's look at the most cut and dry scenario for LSU, right? We know what that is. If LSU wants I hesitate to call it the easiest path because it's not easy to do, but it's the most cut and dry path to the NCAA tournament, and that is sweeping Ole Miss in the final regular season weekend at Alex Box Stadium. LSU right now is obviously sitting on 10 SEC wins, 13 SEC wins in the regular season, and you feel pretty good. You're looking at an Ole Miss team that is coming off a massive series win over Texas A&M that has bumped their RPI into the top 25, which means that is now a quad one opportunity for LSU to close out the regular season. You sweep that, it's going to skyrocket your RPI up. You'll need Ole Miss to kind of keep winning a little bit to keep it quad one, but for right now, quad one, that'll skyrocket you up. It will obviously give you 13 conference wins, and you would feel pretty good. Now, that is obviously going to be a very difficult task. Ole Miss, we've talked about them. It's funny. It's like, do I think Ole Miss is a good baseball team? Not really. I don't. And before everyone jumps on down my throat, I don't think LSU is a good baseball team. We've talked about that plenty. But they're in the same situation. It's just how you look at the SEC. It's the strength of this league. But when you look at Ole Miss, they're 3 games above 500 total on the season, but they have 12 quad one wins. Like, Ole Miss has registered some really big wins against a really tough schedule, the number 2 strength of schedule overall. So while I can sit here and tell you I don't think they're a good baseball team, I say that in the same vein as where I think LSU isn't a good baseball team. It doesn't mean they aren't capable of winning. Of course they are. They play in the SEC. They have a lot of talent, but like LSU, they have very obvious flaws. One of them is their pitching staff, which performed exceptionally this past weekend against Texas A&M. But it's fair to say, is that the exception or the rule? I would lean a little bit more towards the exception to this point. But again, you've seen them in certain scenarios, certain situations this year really step up. They took a series from South Carolina. That's 2 of their quad one wins. They beat Tennessee on the road at Tennessee. LSU couldn't do that. We could go on and on and on and on with it. They took a series from Mississippi State. That's another big quad one opportunity for them there. So, Ole Miss, while, again, no, I don't think they're good. They're very capable, and it's going to be very difficult for LSU to pull this off at home. Sweeping LSU, their game 3 problems, well documented. We don't really need to rehash them. The one thing I will say is what makes it so frustrating with LSU in game 3 is it's been multiple different reasons that they've lost them. And you're looking at LSU in conference play at 1-8 in game 3s. They've lost 9 of 10 since Xavier. LSU has not won or swept a weekend, I should say, since they were in Houston. And that is arguably the best baseball they've played all year, is that weekend in Houston. So, yeah, the evidence is very much stacked against them sweeping this series against Ole Miss. I fully understand that, but it is your easiest path. And again, I hesitate to say easiest. It's your most cut and dry path. The thing with LSU in game 3s, like I was getting to there, it's been multiple different things. Earlier in conference play, it was just everything. Everything was bad. They weren't pitching well. They weren't hitting well. The last few weeks, LSU has pitched well enough in game 3. Well enough to win. The offense has continued to lack. You have not had the complementary baseball needed in game number 3 for LSU the last 2 months. You just haven't, except for against Missouri. That's the only time. Look at that game against Alabama. LSU gave up 4 runs all within the first 3 innings. Then they hung nothing but zeros, and the offense mustered 3 runs. Like, you got clutch pitching performances from your guys, some of them who had struggled at points this year, stepping up in a huge game for their team, but you couldn't get anything going offensively. The same thing could have been said in that game against Auburn when you're trying to sweep at home there. LSU, you dug a hole early. That was the Cade Anderson start. You dug a hole early and then continued to put up zeros, but your offense couldn't put together enough runs. Your pitching staff gave them plenty of runway to mount the comeback, and it kept falling short. You had opportunity after opportunity, but you left guys all over the base paths. I've seen a lot of people complain about LSU's pitching staff at this point in the season. And here's the thing. I'm not here to tell you LSU's pitching staff is great. I'm not here to tell you that they've been anything close to what we thought or even what they should be at this season. But y'all, they've been better. And that's just, it's not argued. That is undeniable. You cannot argue with me on that because there are stats against good teams. This isn't me just saying, oh, yeah, they shoved against Auburn. No. They shut down Texas A&M and won that series largely behind bullpen. And not just Griffin Herring, other guys stepping up, like Gavin Guidry, like Justin Lohr, like Christian Little. You've seen development there. The problem is it has not worked in tandem enough for you to get the wins to close out and sweep series. You had an opportunity against Bama, couldn't do it. Had an opportunity against Auburn, couldn't do it. Had an opportunity against Texas A&M, couldn't do it. The one thing I will say where the pitching staff does need to get better on Sunday or game 3 is avoiding the big inning. Because that's been a huge problem. Against Auburn, you had the big inning. It was the Cade Anderson start. Against Texas A&M, obviously you gave up 9 runs in the 5th. That can't happen. Against Alabama, you had that 3-run second. Now, there were other extenuating circumstances, passed ball, all things of that nature, whatever. That's the one thing I would say for them. But the more frustrating part, for me at least right now in Game 3, is the lack of offensive production. Now, you look at Ole Miss, you see a pitching staff that struggles. Could you find more offensive success against them? Potentially. But I liken that to the Ben Hess situation that you saw at Alabama. A guy who came in with an ERA just south of 7 on the season and over 5 in his career, and he shut you down for 6 2/3. It's baseball. Weird things happen. Yeah, that could happen. The other thing, the other side of the coin is, it's baseball. Weird things happen. Sure, LSU could sweep Ole Miss in the final week of the regular season. They could. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm predicting that. And I think most of you who have listened to this show know that because I've said consistently for the better part of 2 months that I don't think this LSU team is good enough to sweep anybody in conference play. I picked them to take 2 out of 3 against Mizzou, picked them to take 2 out of 3 against Auburn because I didn't think they could sweep. I still think that. But could it happen? Sure, because it's baseball. And that's your most cut and dry path into the NCAA tournament without having to use the SEC tournament. Sweep Ole Miss at home. Tyler on Twitter sent me in a question earlier, and I responded to him on Twitter, and we talked about it there. But one thing I've learned is if one person's thinking it and asking it, others are too. So I thought I would address it here as well. And Tyler asked if I could see a scenario where LSU pitches Cade Anderson or Javen Coleman Thursday night and keeps jumping home and on their regular rest, trying to, have your 2 best at the back end of that series. And I fully understand what he's going for there. Sure, you know, those guys have been your best. You've really tried to win behind them. Like, it's kind of been said that you can't lose those games when they pitch because it's your best chance. So I totally get that. But my answer was absolutely not, because you're going for a sweep. Like, you can't sweep if you don't win the first game. And you have to have your best guys going in order to do that. We can talk down the line what that might look like in the SEC tournament for availability for guys, because you'd be playing on Tuesday. And I actually think that's a simpler answer than not, at least given the situation that LSU's in this go-round. But for me, no. I mean, you keep everything the same. You go jump, Holman, TBA. You try to win game 1, game 2, and then whatever you have left in game 3, you throw every bullet, and I mean every bullet, even if that's Griffin Herring coming back and pitching a second time in the weekend. You haven't seen that at all this year, and I've kept saying it's going to take a special circumstance. If you have a chance to sweep Ole Miss and punch your ticket to the NCAA tournament, then, folks, that's as special as the damn circumstance gets, and you absolutely have him available. You absolutely have him available, provided he didn't go like 60-some-odd pitches or whatever earlier in the weekend. But this is going to be the biggest all-hands-on-deck effort if you have a chance to sweep that series against Ole Miss. And I mean all hands on deck. So that's that scenario. Here's the other one. And this is where it gets complicated. It's not the right word, but this is where I want everyone to really listen to what I'm saying. And that's the SEC tournament. So we will start this by looking at LSU's current resume, their current metrics, do some projecting. We'll look at the current SEC tournament field if the event started today, and do some projecting, and let's see where LSU comes out in this scenario. So if we're looking at LSU's current resume as it stands right now, their metrics are still very good. LSU's RPI at the time of this recording is 34th. They are ranked number 34. They have a top 20 strength of schedule, very good. 5 quad 1 wins, not great, but not horrible, and that could go up, obviously, against Ole Miss. And I'll give you another team to watch. Watch Xavier. Xavier right now is 27th in the RPI. You played that series at home, so Xavier would need to get into the top 25 in the RPI for that to count quad 1. But if they can, that gives you 2 more quad 1 wins. That's massive. Now, Xavier has a massive opportunity in their own right Tuesday night against Oklahoma, the 15th ranked team in the RPI. If Xavier can go on the road, that's at home. If Xavier can upset Oklahoma at home, that alone is going to pole vault them into the top 25 in the RPI. And then they have a series against Villanova, who's dreadful, and they'd have to sweep that to really maintain that status. But keep that in mind, because that's a hidden advantage potentially for LSU's resume. And that does matter in the scenario that we're fixing to go through. So you're looking at LSU, 34th in the RPI, so your top 35, top 20 strength of schedule, and those 5 quad 1 wins. You're looking somewhere in the range of about 13 to 15 wins against the top 50 in the RPI total this year, depending on how that fluctuates. And I hesitate to put an exact number on that right now, just because it could literally change in the next 2 minutes that I'm speaking. So your metrics are good and could and should get better as the week and weeks progress. Let's look at the SEC tournament field. If the SEC tournament started today, LSU would be the 12 seed. LSU has not clinched an SEC tournament berth. They need 1 win to do so. LSU is 2 games up on Missouri and holds the tiebreaker over Mizzou. And oh, by the way, Missouri this weekend has, let's just say, a really, really, really tough draw. Anybody want to guess? Say it out loud while you're watching this if you want. Missouri closes the regular season at Mississippi State. Not going to be projected to win that one. I say all of that to say while LSU hasn't clinched an SEC tournament spot, it would be a massive upset at this point if they don't. Because you're 2 games up on Mizzou, your magic number is 1, and you even hold the tiebreaker over that team. Not impossible. Sure, it could happen, but it would be a monumental upset. So LSU right now would be the 12 seed in the SEC tournament. That means they would play the 5 seed in the last game of the day on Tuesday, which, yes, is brutal because that could start at 8 o'clock or, hell, it could start at 10:30. Who knows? It's a terrible place to be. We could have Musso at the box after dark post-game for that, but you would play the 5 seed in the last game of the day on Tuesday, and right now, that would be the Georgia Bulldogs. Yes, those Georgia Bulldogs with Charlie Condon, an incredible offense, and your former pitching coach, Wes Johnson, as the head coach. Not a great matchup for LSU in terms of on-field and how you think they actually might fare. But in terms of what it could do for your resume, it'd be a massive opportunity. And again, all of that could change. The seeding is not set. This is just where it is today. So this is just an exercise. All right, here's where it matters. Let's say LSU doesn't sweep Ole Miss, which I don't think that they will. Let's say they win 2 out of 3, and LSU sitting at 12 and 18 in conference play. Well, we go back to our graphic from the SEC Network and look at eligible at-large SEC teams since 1999, when the Super Regionals joined the NCAA Tournament format. There's been 17 teams to finish at 12 and 18 since 1999. 3 of them, 18%, have made the NCAA tournament. So it is possible, but it's minuscule. So even if you don't sweep Ole Miss, you are not mathematically eliminated. That is inarguable. You are not mathematically eliminated. That's where the SEC tournament comes into play. What would LSU need to do? And a lot of people are going to tell you they would need to win it. And that's where we get back to cut and dry. That is the most cut and dry way to do it. Win the SEC tournament, you get an automatic bid. You're in. Doesn't matter what your record is, regular season, conference, doesn't matter. You win it, you're in. That is cut and dry. Now, that is a monumental task. Everything we're about to talk about here is a monumental task. But let's say LSU is 12 and 18. They beat Ole Miss 2 out of 3. And in this scenario, they go face Georgia. Well, Georgia right now is the number 3 team in the RPI. You win that game on a neutral field, that is easily quad 1. That is going to shoot you up. And from there, like let's say you do that, from there, LSU would go on to face the 4 seed, who would have a bye. Right now, that would be Texas A&M. Monumental task. I get it. You'd probably be facing Ryan Prager at that point. You know, they'd have their guy ready to go. Now, does Texas A&M really need the SEC tournament this year? No, they don't. Could that influence how they do things? Sure. There's a lot of variables at play. That's what we're talking. But if you beat Georgia, and then you go beat Texas A&M, who you would face, who's number 2 in the RPI, you would advance. And if chalk holds, you would face the number 1 seed, Kentucky, who is also the number 1 team in the RPI. And if you were somehow to beat them, you would absolutely, and this is the part I really want you to listen to, you would absolutely have a resume worthy of selection. Does it mean you would get in? I'm not telling you that I think they would get in. I'm saying they would have a resume worthy of selection. I personally think LSU, if they take 2 of 3 from Ole Miss, which, again, could be quad 1, beat Georgia, beat A&M, in the eyes of the committee, that would have them at 14 wins, a probably somewhere low 20s, maybe even a top 20 RPI at that point, but probably low 20s, and that would be a resume worthy of selection. Again, worthy, not saying they would be in, But what I am telling you is right now, I don't think, given the potential path that we're looking at right now, I don't think LSU would have to win the tournament, which is a monumental task, and so is this. I'm not sitting here telling you that any of this that we're talking about is even likely. Because, again, the evidence would point to the contrary, that no, it's not likely. But it's baseball, and teams get hot. And damn it, this LSU team has not gotten hot yet this year. Boy, they are due to get hot. Are they likely to get hot? No. Are they due to get hot? Yes. And if they do, and all of this holds, that is a resume worthy of selection. Would it get them in? I don't know, but it's worthy of selection. The other part of that, and this is why when we've sat here, even 2-3 weeks out, 4 weeks out even from Selection Monday, and we've looked at LSU's path outside of 13 conference wins, it's why we've already started to look at other teams on the bubble. Because what they do matters as well. That's the other part of this. That's why, again, I say worthy of selection, because you're competing with other teams on the bubble. That's why the bubble sucks. There's so much that can go wrong out of your control. You have bid stealers, teams that are really good, but you got a one-bid league like the Southland, right? You're going to get a one-bid league there, and then a team comes out of nowhere and wins the conference tournament and gets in, and you still maybe have that other one-bid, that team, and it ends up being a two-bid league. Things like that happen, and that can bump you. But you look in your own conference, and things like that can happen. Y'all, Florida, at least at the time of this, still has not scheduled makeup games in the midweek to potentially try and bolster their resume. If Florida gets swept by Georgia or loses 2 out of 3 and then goes one and done in the SEC tournament, they might not even be eligible because of their overall record. If that's the case, you could slide into their spot potentially. There are a lot of different things that play in that. That's why I hesitate to just be like, oh, if they don't sweep Ole Miss, they have to win the SEC tournament. Because I think the path that you would travel is fruitful enough that if you could score some upsets, you're going to bolster your resume before even getting to the weekend in Hoover. That's just my opinion looking at projections, how things stand right now, looking at LSU's resume and taking it in a vacuum while knowing, sure, there's plenty that could go wrong for you around the country. And again, I'll say that's why we've kept up with that already, because I don't think it's ever too early to keep an eye on that kind of stuff. The bubble is a really sucky place to be. It is filled with danger, despair, and darkness. But that's where you are. You should never be there if you're LSU, but that's where you are. And that's what you're looking at. As far as LSU seeding in the tournament, told you right now they'd be the 12. They sweep Ole Miss, they'll be the 11th. LSU could get as high as 10. That would require Florida getting swept by Georgia and you at least winning the series against Ole Miss. In that vein, Florida would drop below you by a game, and you'd have a tiebreaker over Ole Miss, and LSU should slide into the 10 spot there. I don't think that's likely. I think Florida at least takes one game off of Georgia, even in Athens. And I think you're looking at LSU being somewhere the 12 or the 11. If LSU takes the series from Ole Miss, you'll have a tiebreaker, the same record. You'd be the 11, they'd be the 12. And yes, that would change this scenario a lot. But right now we're dealing with the scenario that we have. And that's what I've got for you there. The cut and dry way, win the tournament. But that's an even bigger task than what we just went through with trying to win 2 or 3 games and getting yourself a resume worthy of selection. That's the key to that. Worthy of selection. That is life on the bubble, and that is a really awful place to be, especially as the defending champion. But it's where LSU is. All right. That is LSU's updated path. That is where they stand. We will talk plenty more about scenarios with the SEC tournament, what things might look like going forward, all of that still to come. We'll obviously get you a look at some projected fields of 64 along the way. We'll give you a deep dive preview on Ole Miss along the way. We've reached the final week of the regular season, and there are no shortage of things to talk about. LSU, even though it's been ugly, they're playing meaningful baseball in the last week of the regular season, and ultimately you want that in some capacity, and they have it in droves. So we will have you covered wall to wall here on Musso at the Box. Appreciate everybody listening. Y'all smash the like button on your way out. Get subscribed up to the YouTube channel if you have not already. Get subscribed up on your favorite podcast app if you have not already. Follow me on social media, a few of them scrolling there on the bottom, and keep it locked and loaded. Be here next time for more on Musso at the Box.